Good day, everybody, and welcome to Many Faces of Conservation. This is one of SSU's Dig into Nature Fall 2022 educational series, and it's also presented as part of one of our Geography, Environment, and Planning classes, Society, Environment, and Sustainable Development. And Wendy St. John is the teacher of that class, and she wanted to say a few minutes at the top of the time, so go ahead, Wendy.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that we're all here, and thanks to all of our presenters from being here. I'm super excited to hear what's going to be happening. The one thing I wanted to really quick say is that those of you who are in GEP 206, I'm typing the assignment into the chat right now. So all you need to do is take some notes. They don't need to be written up formally. Just type them up and you're going to submit them to Canvas. And Margot, will you let us know again how to make sure that everybody's hearing either the English or the Spanish version that they want to be able to hear?
Well, why don't I just say that right now? So if you look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a button that says interpretations, which I'm not actually seeing on mine right now.
Do you have interpretation turned on? Because I don't see it anymore now that I turned mine on to English.
Exactly.
So it might have gone away.
So if you have not, maybe it goes away when you turn it up. Yes, it does. Okay, so English is on here. So you should have a button. It looks like a globe, the world, and it says interpretation, and you need to select either English or Spanish. Two of our presenters will be presenting in Spanish with simultaneous interpretation from our wonderful volunteer, Sonia, who is in Quito, Ecuador. And you should be able to hear everybody in both languages, even though I think if you have that button on. This is the first time we've done this, so it's an experiment. We're always trying new things. Thank you to our moderator, Alejandro, for setting this up for us. So my name is Margot. Are you finished, Wendy? Did you want to say more?
I just wanted to say that I'm getting a DM from one of my students that they're not seeing that option on the computer. So it was one of the options down along the bottom, like next to where there's a button that says live transcript and reactions. It was there for me.
I can see it right now. This is Carrie, also with the center. And for me, it is right next to the reactions button. So you might have to expand your screen to be able to see it.
Yeah, or click the little more. If there's the little dot menu for more, you might need to do it to get there. So Hallie, let me know if that works for you. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Did it work for her?
I don't know yet.
Okay. Well, if you're still having trouble, put something in the chat and we'll see if she seems to have gotten it. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that Carrie. Because I guess once you turn it on, it tells you what language you're in, and it takes away that interpretation button. So anyway, my name is Margot Rollins, and I'm a program coordinator for the Center for Environmental Inquiry at Sonoma State University. I'm going to be your host today. It's going to be a complex program. I think it's going to be very exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. And so if there's anything that you need, put information in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. If there's some clarifying questions, you can stick them in there also. And we will ask them to our presenters as they are coming along. We will be saving our regular Q&A on the content until the end of the program. We've got about 15 minutes set aside for that. Because this is a class, we will end right at 2:15 because the class must be dismissed. I think our speakers are willing to stay on a little bit longer if there are other questions, but the students need to be able to leave on time. We want to acknowledge, honor, and make visible that Sonoma State University and our 3 wildlands preserves are on the ancestral lands of Native peoples, and we encourage you to learn more about them at cei.sonoma.edu. Personally, I am coming to you from Mendocino County, which is the ancestral lines of the Central Pomo. So would everybody please take a minute and type your full name into the chat? That's kind of our attendance sheet. I appreciate that. And, oh, that's interesting. I'm sorry, something strange appeared on my screen. We have presenters today from various parts of the Western Hemisphere. Am I frozen to anybody? Alejandro?
I can see and hear you fine.
because everybody else is frozen on my
I can
screen.
hear and see you too.
Okay, I'm sorry, because you're all frozen on my screen, so some things I'll have to fix in a minute. Our presenters are coming from different parts of the Western Hemisphere today. We have Patricia, who is coming to us from Ecuador, along with Alejandro Ibarra, who is our moderator for the program. And we are hoping that Albert will be joining us from the Yucatán in Mexico. He's been traveling and he may not be able to get back in time to join us today. We are presenting it but Patricia speaks only in Spanish, and she's talking about the work that they're doing in their area to combat climate change. And we have our interpreter, Sonia Albarracin, who will be interpreting direct for us into English so we can follow what Patricia is telling us. Before we begin, I wanted to tell you just a brief bit about the center. We are here at SSU to empower students of all ages, university, high school, community students, and all disciplines to solve the environmental challenges of the North Bay, to turn education into action. We provide direct outdoor learning experiences on our 3 preserves, and we invest in real-world projects working with faculty, community, and students across all disciplines in order to develop projects focused on finding solutions to these environmental challenges. We want you to leave today with a better understanding. Carrie, would you put the URL into the chat for me, please? We want you to leave today with a better understanding of all of our connectivity with the environment and with some new and honed skills about how you can contribute to some of the sustainable solutions we'll be talking about. Today, we're going to focus on Northern California. We have a speaker also joining us, Ron Goode, and he is with the North Mono tribe, and he will, Alejandro is going to give us much more of a detailed description of our speakers than I'm giving you at the moment. So he is coming to us from the Yosemite area, and then we have the Ecuadorian Amazon, which is where Patricia is. So I think we are ready to go. I will put my email in the chat if anybody has any questions and needs to get through there. If I could figure out how to unfreeze my screen. So Alejandro, do you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for attending. Just a friendly reminder, if possible, for Ron and I will do it myself, to speak a little bit slower than we usually do, just to allow Sonia for the translation, simultaneous translation to happen in a very friendly way, because we usually tend to speak very fast, and that usually difficults the translation. So thank you very much, Sonoma University and Center for Environmental Inquiry for creating this space. As Margaret mentioned before, we will have a discussion about climate change and some solutions. But first, I would like to acknowledge and gather insight for our speakers and from what we are doing either in the native communities and also in the Amazon region, which Patricia is coming from. So I would like to thank, and with open hearts and understand it, I would like to thank as well Ron for joining us, in all the community as well, for joining us in this conversation. We are extremely grateful for the opportunity to listen and share as well our insights, and we hope to have questions and different opinions from the people who is attending today. And also, as Margaret mentioned before, Albert, who was coming from Mexico, may not join us. We're waiting for him, but well, let's see what happens. So for us, thank you very much. It's been an honor to share with you all. And with that, I would like to start by presenting who's joining us today. First of all, we have Ron Goode. He's the tribal chairman for the North Fork Mono tribe. He's joining us with over 39 years of working inside the institution, inside the tribe as well. And we hope to have all his words and wisdom sharing from the first part of the session. Secondly, we will have Patricia Menkainen Kiwi. She's a human rights activist and president of the Guarani Women of Ecuador. She has been invited to several countries to give testimonies of the resistance process carried out by the Guarani women against the presence of the oil, mining, and logging industries in the territory carried out by the government and other oil industries around the world.
This one is down here.
I will present myself as well. My name is Alejandro Ibarra. I'm the Community Solutions Program and U.S. Department alumnus from a program called Community Solutions Program, and I actually support the strategic planning process of the Community Foundation of Mendocino County during 2021, and I work along with Bonnie Lockhart with Community American communities and Latin American communities doing several groups, and there I met Margot and everyone else in the group, and I'm the monitoring and evaluation officer of an NGO from the Netherlands called EVOS. And I will presenting you today the aspects of many phases of conservation. This is our topic today, and as you know, there are many phases, many stories and experiences in fighting climate change around the world, and that's what we're trying to bring you today. And experience different ideas on what's happening in the territories and what's happening in land conservation. So we know that climate change has a deep and long-lasting effect on the environment and livelihoods worldwide, and more countries acknowledge that culture, conservation, and resilience have become ideas to transcend borders and inspire innovative, preventive, and adaptable solutions. I will explain in a minute what are all these words, but in many cases, this knowledge comes from indigenous communities and also from local communities who are working against climate change, even though these people are the most affected by the effects of climate change in the long term. And without them, without the original owners and guardians of the earth and local actions, our planet's further degradation will be unavoidable. So it's important for us to understand and also to share the fact that not only climate change is real, but we are seeing these effects increasing every day and effects in the long-term scenarios. So for starters, I would just like to give a brief, very brief introduction about climate change. I personally work with climate change and biodiversity conservation in Ecuador. Here are some pictures of different land types in Ecuador, but we know that the world is getting warmer. According to different studies, you hear every day that climate change, and everyone is saying different things about climate change, but we all hear news about just how the average weather is changing, how the climate is changing, but we may not notice what's happening in climate change in unusual lives. In the case of the fires, in the case of the emergencies, in the case of the droughts, we see every day, and the time is passing by, that more and more people is affected by this notion of this idea of climate change. But what is climate change? Actually, climate is the average weather in a place over many years. So that's happening over many years. What's the weather like in those territories? And the climate change is a shift in those average conditions. Is a change that we see after many years of the data shows that the changing is happening. For example, the annual mean land and ocean temperature above or below average from 1850 to 2020 is very different. You see a stripe in this average calculation of how the world is getting warmer in this fair graph. But we know that the rapid climate change we are now seeing is caused by humans using oil, gas, and coal for their homes, factories, and transports. And with these fossil fuels burn, they release greenhouse gases, mostly carbon dioxide, and these gases trap the sun's heat and cause the planet temperatures to rise. So the fact that we have climate change is not because carbon dioxide is all around the atmosphere, but it's because this greenhouse gas creates an effect that traps the sun's heat inside the earth and increases the heat of the planet. So how does that affect us? It only affects us in the warmer seasons, what's happening in the regions, the land and the ocean temperatures are warmer. It's not only that, but the fact that people in poorer countries will suffer the most as they do not have the money to adapt to climate change, for example. You see that, okay, I need an AC conditioner and I need these solutions for my house. We need to counter fires in the territory, but we can do that in poorer territories and poorer countries. Many farms in developing countries already have to go endure climates that are too hot, and this will only get worse over time. So how will different parts of the world be affected? Climate change has different effects. For example, things are getting warmer, there's more rainfall, more droughts, and especially in drought, there's new drought conditions are likely in the Western US, while other areas will see more intense storms in different parts of the world. And as you know, California is grappling with drought, again, facing many of the same conditions and challenges that were featured in the 2012-2016 droughts. And we see increased stress ecosystems, depleted reservoirs, less water, hard-hit farms and rural communities. And we know, and most of the people, especially in different parts of the world, believe that climate change is real, but this is not true for everyone. But most of the voices speak that climate change is something that's happening, and we know it's happening because of the effects that we see every day. But what is climate change in a picture? I love this image because it shows what mitigation and adaptation means. And those words basically mean what things that you can do to mitigate or reduce the impact of climate change, and what's the things that we can do to adapt ourselves to climate change. And all these different aspects of this in this picture, all these ideas that you see are actually projects and things that are carried out not only by the organizations, government, but also the local communities. For example, working with clean water, fighting for preserving the water. And this is very important because water conservation is crucial, not only for people in the cities, but also for local communities who live in these conditions. And oil companies usually tend to destroy the possibilities to have water conservation. We have to prepare to have wildfire resilience, create resilience buildings, work with low carbon transportation and renewable energy. Those are some ideas that we can do. And this is something that we are, as humans, are trying to invest, but these are solutions that we are giving to a problem that we are also creating. So you can see here, climate change, in climate change and in climate, everything is connected. Everything is connected and interconnected. People seek to accelerate global climate action through emissions reduction, scale adaptation efforts, and enhance flows of appropriate finance. So we need finance to make these changes, but we also getting finance from oil companies and mining companies. Everything is so difficult sometimes to understand, to grasp on the difficult situation that we are living right now and the need for change. And this cry for change comes in a time where there is a turning point. Either we can do something now, or we won't be able to make a change in the future. In this interconnection, we can see that there is changing in seasonal patterns, there is more droughts, there is stronger storms, the rise in sea level is, the sea level is increasing, not because the North Poles are defreezing and we are seeing increase in those water levels, but because we are creating conditions for the water to increase in warmer oceans. We are killing the vegetation, killing the animals. We are not taking into consideration what is the reality of the local communities and how these local communities have created solutions for climate change. And we just recognize that transition, this ecological transition that we are seeing remains a priority, not only for developing countries, but for in development countries as well. But what is the role of Indigenous people? And I put the picture of Patricia here as well. The role of Indigenous people is more evident than ever and not clear because this is a powerful voice and they are screaming, not as individuals, but as part of the world. we are seeing solutions coming out in the last decade about how to combat climate change and what these solutions are. But people usually don't hear the solutions as we don't see it as formal knowledge. So it's also very important, and I hope Ron will talk about that too, the role of traditional knowledge and their interconnection with the knowledge that we think that is formal in the reality of the world. So the caretakers and original owners of the land, they are more impacted than everyone else by climate change. At the same time, they are the front runners against climate change. This call to action has been made in urban and rural communities throughout the Americas, and many people are already talking about these changes and how to support local communities. So one of the objectives of this session is to understand how to become a champion of nature. What is the things that you can do as citizens, as people in the communities, as part of the world, to create positive change, not only for indigenous peoples and native communities, but also for the world in general. And some ideas for the next session is why it is so important to us to understand biodiversity conservation. And I remember in one of the first sessions was this question: why is biodiversity and why is the Amazon region, for example, why is nature so important? And it's because not only the land itself, not only the trees itself, but the connection that the people have to nature. And this interconnection brings us to the idea that we have to take care of this world, fight against climate change, not only because of its repercussions and the direct impact that it has on us and in future generations, but as well as why do we need solutions from nature, for example? Why do we need bioeconomy? Some of the, and Patricia will present us as well. We love chocolate, for example, and she will present her marvelous work in chocolate as part of the bioeconomy, which is a side of economy that the principle is working with bioenterprises to preserve the land and create land management to reduce greenhouse emissions. But this also brings us to local development and sustainability and knowledge and awareness. Where is the operational cooperation going? What are we doing to create this local development, and how these solutions are varying and increasing in every part of the world? And also COVID-19. COVID-19 has changed a lot for us. We are in Zoom right now, actually, because COVID is happening. So in my side, in this moment, in this particular situation, for me, COVID is positive because I was allowed somehow to be able to connect with you in this session because COVID was happening. And if not for COVID, it would be for me impossible, nearly impossible to be in this moment with you. And for some communities and for people working in climate change, COVID has been a positive situation and a framework to develop new solutions for nature. So I just want you to get this idea that solutions for nature are important, but also the actions that you take and the connection that you bring against this idea of Western knowledge, local or indigenous knowledge. These are not separate concepts. And I think you will understand that getting a connection and getting a bridge between the understanding that everything is interconnected, it will be ideal to get solutions for the long term. There is a need for advocacy, and climate action is a task for us all. And it concerns us. It concerns us as we can do something together. We have to speak up to local leaders. We have to start the conversations with family and friends and colleagues and let our voices be heard in the public debate. These are some of the solutions that we can, as students, as people, to get different reactions for what is happening in the world. So I just wanted to leave you with these general ideas about climate change, these notions, these solutions, and some of the regards of many phases of conservation and what we're trying to achieve today. And I will pass the words to Ron. First, he, as I mentioned before, is the chairman for the North Fork Mono Tribe, and I thank him very much for his time and also for bringing wisdom and sharing his thought with us. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Had to wait to be unmuted there. Manahu, hanit wa'u. Nu iboso, hansat chau. Hello, everybody. I hope that you're doing fine. Good to thank you for inviting me to be a part of what you're doing today. And thank you to all of our friends that have joined here together today to talk about a very serious issue. Alejandro, you did a wonderful job. Good job leading in here to what we're doing. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you, Ron.
So I've got a pretty, extensive talk, but kind of want to start with a couple of things that you were discussing. And I think one of the important things when we look at our world, number one, the dust from Mongolia actually feeds the Amazon. Not a whole lot of people understand that. And not a whole lot of people know that. But you have to take into account what that means then. That throughout the world, nature is constantly working to take care of itself in other places. So from one continent to another. The other thing that I want to bring up is that there's been studies, primarily National Geographic, but in 1991 and in 2015, the research on water is that the world still has the same amount of water it's always had. We don't have more, we don't have less. But what we have is a population, as you showed, that has, multiplied 10 times. So we have a people problem. And that is definitely that 1850 to 1950 is an important factor of change in time. And it's a change in time of a thought process as we speak of and listen to indigenous people from 1950 to 2020. Those that are the dominant are the colonial thinkers. And what does that mean? What that means is that the people that are in charge, their mindset is still on the economics of nature. That's what they came to America for, and that's what they're still here for. So until we change these concepts, one of the points that I'm going to drive home is I'm working with the Forest Service right now, and they're redoing their forest plan revision for how they're going to look at the next 20, 30 years. And in that plan revision, they have two things: recreation sustainability and economic sustainability. What they don't have is forest health sustainability. Nothing for the forest health. That is what I'm speaking about when I'm talking about the colonial thinkers. That no matter how much the tribes have input to the forest, they cannot think past what they've been doing and what they've known. I mean, we ask the forest all the time, what you've been doing for 170 years and for 3 centuries, when is what you've been doing, your practices, your policies, going to work? In the next century? The reality is it's not. Hasn't, and it's not going to. Now, what are we talking about? That's when we come back into the practices. So before I come into those factors, You spoke of climate change, and that's what we're talking about. Here in California and in the world, climate change is not new. The world is always in climate change. The world will always be in climate change. Back in 450 AD to 1650 AD, we had two mega droughts. One of them was 250 years and the other was 180 years. In between, we had a 50-year flood. Fast forward to 1987, we are currently in our 35th year of a drought. But the colonial thinkers say we're in our 6th drought in that 35-year period, because in between we had El Niños and we had flooding and we had snowpack and we had rain and more snow. And yet here we are in our 6th, thought I turned that thing down. Hang on just a minute. Hi, I'm on the Zoom. I'll get back to you.
Hey, Ron, you're on a Zoom?
Yeah, bye.
Okay.
I tried to turn it off. Anyway, so that's where we are right now, looking at, they don't want to realize and come out and say that we're in a 35-year drought. There's not going to be a problem with 50 years of where we are. But everybody wants to deal with a piece of the pie and not the whole pie. So let's move to factors for just a minute. Looking at what are these major factors, and one of them is that it's people. Because we have multiplied 10 times, agriculture in California is new. Agriculture in California is only, well, it's close to 100, about 90 years old now. Started in around 1930s. Started when the Dust Bowl came, and then we start putting in dams. Eventually we put in tunnels, transferring water, holding water, trying to manage water. We have presidents and Congress people who come in and cry because the water is being let out to the ocean. Our Creator did not put dams on the river. Colonial people put dams on the river. We have 15 dams on our river, on our San Joaquin River. So the water from the creeks and from the rivers are not cooling the ocean down. Their design was to cool the ocean. If you're not cooling the ocean's going to get warmer. This whole process of where we're heading, don't worry. Nature and the world has it under control. Because where we're moving is to another ice age. Mother Earth, you have to think of her that we as people are fleas. She's going to shake us and she's going to get rid of us. Because there's too many of us. It's sad to say, but when you start to look at the pandemics, these are the kind of things that begin to happen because we have too many people. And we have no control on how to control those populations. Not yet. There are a few out of the box thinkers, but not many. So people is one of the major factors. We talk about pollution, we talk about, air. You can throw all those in there, but it all comes back to people. The next thing is looking at the ag and the urban growth. So one of the things for heat, I'm getting ready to do an extreme heat presentation with 500 environmental lawyers. But as we talk, the cities where I live, the towns, they're all building, developing, using ag land to put new homes on. They're just spreading out. And what are they replacing it with? Pavement, concrete, houses, brick, roofs, everything that creates heat and absorbs heat. And then, oh, because we need to conserve water, they get real smart. Let's not have real lawns. Let's not have real trees. Let's have desert plants and no lawns. Because that's where we live, is a desert. When in fact, that's not where we live. We used to live in a Mediterranean type climate. The San Joaquin Valley was full of water. Travelways, our people used Thule boats to travel for miles to go see their relatives and to trade and shop with other tribes. All that got cut out because that was the best ag land, was where the flooding was. And now we don't want to flood. Now we got built up canals and travelways and waterways, and we wonder what the problem is. Well, we as Native people, we don't wonder what the problem is. And we know it's not the fact that it's not flooding, it's the people that are managing it. So I'll move, I know I only got 20 minutes, so let's move to another section of factors, and that's forest management. We spend a lot of time with our forest management, as I started with and showed you their concept of life. But back in 1900, early 1900, back in 1850, they shot and killed and paid for scalps for Indians because they had fire on the ground. In 1900, then came the call for more trees. We want more trees. More trees. Well, that's exactly what we got. We got more trees. Before 1850, the entire California forest was less than 40% in canopy. Some of our tribal members and elders say 30%. Today, it is 80 to 90%, if not 100. Now, what does that mean? That means that when it snows and when it rains, 20% of the precipitation and snowpack cannot hit the floor, cannot be absorbed by the root system. And when it does get down on the floor, it immediately runs off. It is not held. So our entire system has been captured, kidnapped. And now our forest management comes along and closes off trails, closes off roads, closes off access. So when we have forest fires that we're going to have, and we've had mega forest fires, then all that needs to burn because it's all dead and dry. And it calls fire. The land calls fire. Fire calls wind. When it's all said and done, it brings back water because there's nothing on the land sucking up the water. Now we have floods. That's the cycle that we're in. When we had the creek fire up here, 380,000 acres burned. The next year we went out and assessed our meadows, and the water was knee deep in every single meadow. because it had lots of water feeding it, because there was no trees holding it back. But that's all part of our management system that we are not taking care of. That upper watershed is what feeds the agriculture, feeds the urban people. So yet nobody wants to put any funds back into it. Nobody wants to put any money back into it. And when I go to them and I ask them what they say, oh, it's too unstable. The upper watershed is too unstable, and the management is too unstable. It's like, and evidently you're unstable because you don't want to do anything about it, you know? It's like, okay. But a bigger factor, you know, is what was put in the 30s and the 50s, the dams and the hydros. These hydros, I work with these all the time, almost daily. They are antiques, antiquated. They're old. They take hours to get ramped up and hours to get ramped down if you want to open up the lake and flood downstream. The power that they generate isn't enough to even take care of a small town, let alone a city. And yet that's what we have. And because they're old and antiquated, we're losing another 20% in trans evaporation. Before it ever gets down to the users and abusers in the valley, we have lost 40% of our water. We can't afford to lose 40% of our water. We don't have, and I started to talk, we still got the same amount of water we always had. We can't afford to be losing it and wasting it, but that's exactly what we're doing. How am I doing on time? Couple more minutes. I didn't see nobody wave. Let me know how much time I got.
You get 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay. Well, I got tons of stuff to talk about, but let me move real quickly. Speaking in terms of, you know, going worldwide, I've been all over the world. I've been to New Zealand. I've been to Australia, working with my Aborigine friends and working with my Maori friends. But when I left Australia, we had a really good talk with our Aborigine friends because they were in the same boat we were. They were actually forced removed off the land. And during that time, mega fires came. And so, you know, the government finally realized that they need to be back out on the land and they need to be burning. So that's one of the things they did. But in the end, when we all left, the thought was, you know, go home, work in your backyard, because it's all that we have control of. So whatever country you're in, wherever you're at, it's all that we have control of is what we have in our backyard. My backyard includes 4 different counties. All right, that's cool. And, you know, I work with the Seminoles in Florida. I work with the First Nation people in Canada. You know, I've talked with the Ecuadorian people before, Mexico folks, Australian, New Zealand, all over the world, working on what we need to do on some of these solutions. One more point. I got 1 more minute. So one of the things that, you know, we're doing here is helping tribes throughout California. We're talking about over 200 tribes. Reestablish fire on the land, fire in their homeland. fire on their land bases, tribal lands, and fire in their public lands that they work with, forests, parks, state lands, helping them to do cultural burning. I've got some, maybe there's students in your class, but I've had a number of students at American Indian Studies and other programs there that from Sonoma that come down to my cultural burns every year. But we have like 15 different colleges from Montana, all over California, Berkeley, Davis, Sonoma, Chico, Fresno State, Arizona University, Utah, you know, all kinds of different colleges, and then about 10 to 12 agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, and about 25 tribes all come together to help us burn. But at the same time, we are now creating a management list, if you want to call it that. And I don't like the word management, but a list that says, do you burn? How do you burn? Do you want to burn? And right now, from October this month to May, I have 8 different tribes that are burning. And so we're going every single month. I'm gone someplace, you know, helping people get started. So it's our way of trying to renew the land. And that's what we do when we do cultural burning. It's a renewal of the land, renewal of the water source. And we want that resource to come back immediately. When it does, it comes back sparse, it comes back green, and it stays that way for years, and it will hold the water in the root system. And when it does, that's when it releases water downstream into your ponds, into your creeks, into your meadows. And that's the system that's supposed to be working. So in our small way, we make it work. But thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Alejandro, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you for all your wisdom and sharing this beautiful information with us. We will get back to you, but because we have a few questions from the audience. But first, I would like to introduce next. Just give me a sec here. Technology. I would like to introduce again Patricia Nkiwi, and she is the president of the Guarani Women of Ecuador. And I will ask her to unmute herself. I think Sonia will be translating this part to all of us.
Guaponi Gawareken, buenas tardes, a nombre de Mujeres Guarani, Amazonía Ecuatoriana. Mi nombre es Nencay, presidenta de asociación que vengo trabajando temas de proyectos alternativos, temas de ambientes, temas de cambio climático, muchas cosas que nos enseñaron nuestros abuelos, cómo debemos utilizar para hacer. En caso de nosotras como mujeres, artesanía, los tintes, cómo hay que cuidar nuestra selva, nuestro bosque, el agua, lagunas, saladeros. Entonces, eso gracias al conocimiento de nuestros abuelos sabios, eso hemos venido manteniendo, practicando. Nosotras, las mujeres, mayoría, no son profesionales. A través de conocimiento y saberes hemos aprendido, y ahora la asociación que formamos desde 2005 hasta ahora hemos trabajado temas de ambiente, cuidado de la naturaleza, de los animales, consumir alimentos no para el mercado. A cambio de eso hemos trabajado proyectos del cacao, las mujeres no somos productoras, tuvimos que aprender todo el proceso, adaptar en cacao, no deforestamos como otros que tienen hectáreas de cacao. Las mujeres sembramos chacra donde alimentamos los alimentos, los que hacemos artesanía, maderable, frutales y así manejamos para que nuestras chacras puedan mantener nuestro producto y poder vender todo lo que hacemos. También hay comunidades que ya no tienen los bosques, reforestamos para que las compañeras puedan tener después de 50, 30 años, siempre estén los árboles, siempre estén las plantas que necesitamos, medicinales, todo eso pensando en nuestra lucha como mujeres ha sido conservar y proteger nuestra selva que es el Parque Nacional Yasuní. Ese era territorio ancestral de nuestros abuelos sabios que lucharon. Gracias a ellos tenemos ninguno de otros países creo que tienen como nosotros. Entonces de eso estamos muy contentas las mujeres trabajando día a día, temas del sembrío, temas de cultura, todo lo que hacemos, reforestación con las mujeres, con las compañeras, con las líderes ancianas, el trabajo y luego queda para nuestros niños que puedan disfrutar de ese bosque. Si cortamos, si dañamos, todo va a quedar contaminado. Entonces eso es nuestro trabajo, nuestro rol como líderes mujeres, que siempre estén en nuestro bosque, el agua, los animales, también las medicinas que hemos utilizado en tiempo de pandemia. Ha sido muy difícil, muy complicado para poder ayudar a nuestras familias que viven en 3 provincias, Pastaza, Napo, Orellana. Y así hemos logrado, hemos peleado con los gobiernos que nos atienden a las nacionalidades. No nos dejen vulneradas los derechos de las familias guaraní. Entonces ese trabajo ha sido importante para nosotras como mujeres, estar unidas, trabajando por bienestar de la familia guaraní. Entonces eso es mi mensaje a los estudiantes, universidades, ONG que están puerta abierta a aportar el granito que queremos, cuidar nuestras selvas. Si nosotros no nos cuidamos, ¿de qué van a vivir? Sabemos que el cambio climático ha pasado, inundaciones, sequía, va cambiando. En tiempos de nosotras, cuando éramos jóvenes, eran diferentes. Ahora va cambiando, calentamiento global también. Entonces, así, si no nos cuidamos, seguirá pasando. Entonces, ahora todos los guaraní a nivel Ecuador, tenemos que cuidar cada país, es poner nuestro corazón, decir que sí voy a cuidar nuestra selva, nuestro bosque, el agua, sin agua no podemos vivir. Entonces, eso muchas veces nosotras las mujeres han dicho que somos malas, que somos ambientalistas, sí, pero sabemos que el petróleo se va a acabar. ¿Acaso el petróleo vamos a comer? Nuestro alimento, donde sembramos, sin tierra, sin agua, no podemos vivir. El bosque, donde nos llevan los vientos, aires puros que necesitamos respirar. Por eso nuestro trabajo, nuestro liderazgo de mujeres hacia los jóvenes, hacia temas de educación también, que vayan aprendiendo desde la casa, desde nuestras familias, empoderando el proceso del trabajo para que nosotras podamos vivir amigablemente al ambiente y cuidando y preservando nuestra cultura. Nosotros no vendemos por vender lo que es artesanía y chocolate. Detrás de eso contamos nuestra historia, quiénes somos, de dónde venimos, quiénes eran nuestros abuelos, de dónde venía, y también muchos ONG aliadas que nos permitieron crecer ese fortalecimiento organizativo como mujeres guaraní, y también llevamos nuestro emprendimiento, artesanía hecha a mano y guau chocolate para la conservación. Entonces, para ayudar también a las mujeres jóvenes que necesitan ahora para estudiar, se requiere recursos, entonces necesitamos de esa forma ayudar, crecer económicamente desde comunidades. Nuestra práctica guaraní nos leemos como universidades en libros escritos, no oralmente nos enseñaron y así practicamos. Nuestros niños ahora enseñamos que ellos puedan seguir manteniendo nuestra cultura, nuestro idioma, nuestras costumbres y sin perder nuestro territorio, que es importante. Eso es lo que hacemos. Muchas gracias a todos los aliados donantes. También nuestro proyecto principal que hemos empezado con programas pequeñas donaciones y así hemos sido, como decir, premiadas, decir, mucha propuesta hemos presentado con otras organizaciones y hemos sido ganadoras y premios. También hemos ganado por hacer trabajo bien, temas de ambiente y todo ese trabajo fue evaluado y estamos muy contentas seguir trabajando y ser ejemplo al resto de las nacionalidades que hemos estado trabajando tema manejo financiero y así para que nuestra generación que no nos olvide nuestra cultura, nuestro costumbre, idioma, todo el trabajo que estamos haciendo como Hawaii y estoy muy contenta con todas las compañeras y los equipos que ahora que presentamos cada organizaciones, universidades, estudiantes, pongamos corazón a sembrar nuestras plantas, podamos seguir manteniendo vivos nuestros aires, nuestros ambientes que queremos que sea en 50 años tener un bosque verde, digamos. Si contaminamos sin agua, sin bosque, todos vamos a morir. Nuestro planeta, pienso que a nivel nacional, nivel local, internacionalmente, tenemos que ayudarnos entre todos. Muchas gracias. Guaponi Gabareque. Gaby, venga, poner.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for the lovely presentation and also sharing the ideas of nature and conservation. I would just like to point some things about Patricia's presentation. As she mentioned at some point, she's working, the Waorani women are working on handicrafts and chocolate. These are part on a framework, an idea of nature-based solutions. And this word or this phrase, nature-based solutions, involve working with nature to address societal changes and provide benefits for both human well-being and biodiversity. So it's the idea to bring out solutions and the idea of nature and using nature in a sustainable way from the knowledge and from the perspective of local communities to bring out solutions, either to increase the income of the communities or to find solutions against land degradation or the increasing the agricultural lands, for example, to fight against oil and mining companies. You have to find innovative ideas and solutions. These nature-based solutions is what Patricia was mentioning at the beginning. And an idea that I loved in hearing her voice was, if we think that oil and mining and these different operations are crucial for the world, what's happening if we end up without food and we have to eat oil? She mentioned that at some point, what are you going to do? Are we gonna have to eat oil because that's the only thing that we will have left? And is it going to end? What's happening when oil is coming to an end? And what's happening if we find these different alternatives, these different allies and support from people, from NGOs? For example, she mentioned the United Nations and the support that she had for households and different committees and people all around the world that are showing their handicrafts and the chocolate. And just as as a story from her community, she also said that the children and the women in their community are learning from their ancestors and the elderly in their community. So we all know that traditional knowledge and passing down this traditional knowledge is not only important for their communities, but part of what is their essence as an indigenous community. And Ron also mentioned it, something about passing these ideas and understanding that climate change is happening. It's not something new. We have only just named it. So we found a name for climate change, but climate change is happening. We found names for resilience, for mitigation from different aspects. And native communities, indigenous communities found this knowledge thousands of years ago. And we are rediscovering this knowledge, but I always mention that it's not rediscovering, it's listening to the voices of indigenous communities, and that's part of also what we're doing today. So I would like to thank Ron and Patricia for their amazing experiences and sharing. We all now have a space for questions, and I have already five questions for our presenters. So I would like to start with Ron as we're going. So Ron, the first question was, you mentioned it, traditional knowledge. So one question was, what is traditional economical knowledge for you? And also, what are your interpretation of the word stewardship? So I will also leave the questions in the chat.
What was the last question, Alejandro?
What is your interpretation of the word stewardship?
Stewardship?
Yes.
Oh, for the word stewardship?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So for traditional knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge, that's something that you're starting to see in our nation, United States. The president just passed a new policy for indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, and everybody from grants down are all trying to throw ecological knowledge because it's a good word to use. But ultimately, you have no traditional ecological knowledge unless you have the traditional cultural practices. And as I spoke earlier, because of all the suppression, oppression, and repression that has gone against us, that a lot of our people went underground with culture or trying not to do anything that was going to get them in trouble. So therefore, our cultural practices have not been very public, and we've had a hard time pushing them to our youth. But now that we're opening up, and now that cultural burning is back and many of the other practices, so is our culture, basketry, language, storytelling, all aspects. Elders come, youth are there, kids are there. Everybody's laughing and giggling because they're like in a candy shop, and they can have as much candy as they want because the resources are now theirs to use and have anytime they want it. All they got to do is tell us, the cultural burners, how they want their resources taken care of. And so that's a huge progress in bringing back culture and what you're doing. That's for the traditional ecological knowledge, then, is the information that has been retained and passed down generational for thousands of years on what we did, how we did it. But there has to be experience. Every tribe has knowledge of how to do things. But if you don't have the experience, that's where you're either going to get in trouble or you're going to find out, what you need to do. And so that's a good point there. Under stewardship is a good word, and we're leaning to that a lot more than management, stewards of the land. But again, no matter how you put it, you're trying to put a label on something. And labels is not what we need. And you heard Patricia, you know, we're just trying to bring back our culture and get that reconnection to the land, reconnection to our resources. When we do that, you know, we don't look at that and say, well, we're stewards. We're land managers. You know, the word that I used, the word that Patricia used was sustainable, because we're looking at the fact that we're still here no matter what we've been through. All of us in every country. We still survived. We still have some knowledge of our culture, some knowledge of our language, knowledge of our resources. And now, whatever we have, we can bring back, and we have leaders that will take us, bring us back. So that's, you know, in a nutshell, what you would look at when talking about stewardship.
Thank you very much, Ron. I will ask now Patricia if she can turn off her camera.
Did you mean turn on her camera?
Yes, but I think she's having some problems.
She's still there, but her,
Yeah, I see
there
her
she
now.
is.
There she is.
And
So-
one thing, Alejandro, since our students will be leaving in the next 5 or 6 minutes, if they're, are you shaking your head, Wendy? No? That maybe we'll make sure that if we have some questions from them, that we get those answered, because some of the members of the public who are able to stay on could ask their questions later. So if there are any students with questions, could we either put student before your name and put it before your question in the chat, so we know that to prioritize it, or you can also unmute yourself and ask your question directly.
And Thomas, who asked a question in the chat, is one of our students. Do you feel that the rush to live out of the cities post-COVID is contributing to the worsening environmental situation in California?
That's a good question. The answer, though, is the way that our problem situation is that people that are moving out of the cities and want to move up, like in the mountains, they want to live, you know, on the ridges, they want to live on the hilltops. And it creates a problem to where you can take care of the forest lands or any of the lands, because you put yourself in fire danger, even if you're 7-10 miles away. That, how do I stop a fire once it gets started and doesn't wipe out your community? So, you know, this is a major problem, and we talked about it with the creek fire folks. It's like you have trees that grow up next to your kitchen window and your trees grow up through your deck. Then you know when a fire comes that you're gone. So just understand that, you know, don't cry, and understand that you're probably not going to get insured because you didn't do anything to take care of your home before, because that's where you wanted to go. So when you leave the city, that doesn't mean that you're running away from something. if you don't know what you're running to, then you end up running into danger. I mean, if you look back and look around at the tribes, you're not going to see them living amongst the brush. And we have the same problem with animals because we've not been able to put fire on the land, and there's an overgrowth of the forest. So the animals for the 120 years or more have been taking their babies to some dark, deep brush to hide them. And of course, that's where we find them after the fire has gone through. You know.
Thank you very much, Ron. Sorry to interrupt you. Patricia just mentioned that she unfortunately has to leave the session, but she would like to end with the words on how can we do something in particular and what's our role for conservation, and a final some final words from her side.
Bueno, gracias a todos. Yo me tengo que ausentarme en temas del viaje, si no, gusto estaría la respuesta dando. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Patricia.
Pongamos
Muchas gracias.
Seguir cuidando nuestra selva, donde estemos, para que puedan vivir en 100, 50 años, quizás no morimos pronto, ver que hemos cuidado, hemos conservado nuestro bosque. Muchas gracias, Alejandro, y a toda la universidad que nos invitaron. Guaponin abareke, gobopa.
This is Ron. If you can put in the chat or something on how we can order some of that delicious looking chocolate,
Yeah.
we'd sure love to know.
She did put her email, her assistant Graciela, her colleague, put her email in there in the chat.
Oh, is it?
And I think that's, yeah, it's up a little ways. I think that was the reason, I think, wasn't it, Alejandro, her responding to the question of where people could get the products? Yeah.
Oh, the www.amae.org. Oh, there's an email there too.
See, yeah, Carrie.
Well, that's
just
their
put
website.
that.
Carrie put their website in, but it's,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can order it on the website.
Yes, and at the end, she just mentioned what Wapuni Wadeke Nangi Wapuni Kevi. It means good afternoon and thank you very much in Waorani. That's her original language.
It's a pretty
Very
language.
cool. So as we're wrapping up really quick, I just want to say thank you so much, Ron, and Alejandro y Patricia. Estoy muy agradecido de que haya hablando con nosotros hoy. Muchas gracias. This has been really, really interesting and such a great event. Muchas gracias, Margot, for setting this all up. And yeah, I've really, really enjoyed it. Oh, and also, gracias, Sonia, por la ayuda con la traducción. I think, gracias. Sí. And if anyone has more questions, you know, yeah, I think people are welcome to say, I do need to leave. I have another meeting right now. But thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. I learned a lot and it was amazing being able to talk to all of you.
And
Thank
also,
you very much.
if you have questions, all of you should have received when you've made your registration for this. My email is in there. And if you have the questions that come to you, please send them to me and we'll see whether our presenters can address them. That would be great. Great. Thank you for bringing your class, Wendy.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Wendy.
Were there other questions or comments or thoughts? Were there other things in the chat, Alejandro?
Yes, just give me. Yeah, Ritz, his question was, for someone who doesn't have an indigenous background and access to that knowledge, do you have any suggestions on how they can tap into solutions that are in a part of Western knowledge?
Good question.
Well, repeat the question. I'm sorry.
Yes. it says that for someone who doesn't have an Indigenous background and access to that knowledge, do you have any suggestions on how they can tap into solutions that aren't a part of Western knowledge?
It is a good question.
Yeah.
Well, I think the answer to that is to try to get yourself connected to here in California or the United States to what the native tribes, indigenous people are doing. If you're in other countries, the same thing. Find the folks that are doing things and get yourself connected. I think the big thing to remember is that knowledge is not something, it's a lifelong learning. It's not something you're going to learn over a weekend. So, don't expect to try to learn as much as you'd like to in a very short period of time. It's something that it's taken us all our life to learn. So, understand that whatever little bit you can learn and understand, get an understanding of it. It doesn't, that's the best way I can put it.
Thank you very much, Ron. And also, how are you working? Sorry, give me a second. Yeah, how are you working with land acknowledgements? Sorry.
Oh yeah, I had that on my talk sheet here because I saw it in your thing. So land acknowledgement is a very interesting thing. It's only started a few years ago, and for us, land acknowledgement is talking about the ancestors that took care of the land as indigenous people. But the reality is that land acknowledgement came about because agencies and others did not want to be a part of something spiritual. They didn't like the blessings that indigenous people would hold and didn't want to take the time that it would take, for us to bless the ground, bless them, cleanse the ground, make offerings. Those were not things that they wanted to be a part of. So they created this land acknowledgement concept that, okay, we can do this in one breath and then move on to whatever it is we're doing. That's the purpose of land acknowledgement, but it's not really what it, has come to. And it has a bigger side because here in California, we have some 60 to 80 tribes that are Aboriginal tribes that are not federally recognized. And yet, when we hold any kind of meetings and we do land acknowledgement, that's whose land we're on, are the Aboriginal tribes. And of course, they're the ones that we mentioned, whose lands are we on? And so it's a very interesting concept that we're still struggling with ourselves. Is, what is land acknowledgement? In most cases, I won't let them get away with not having a blessing. You want to do land acknowledgement? That's fine. I do that too. But, and the way that we as Native people do land acknowledgement is, okay, I just went up north and did a talk in the Maidu area. So I made contact with my Maidu friends and the Maidu people. They all knew I was coming. So I already made my contact with them. I don't come in and then try to pretend that they don't know nothing. I come in with the fact that they know everything. And so, even if they're not there, they're watching me. So I need permission. I need approval to speak. I need approval to let them know that I'm coming. And most of all, I want them to be a part of what we're doing.
When we started this session, Ron, you said something which I assume was in your native tongue. Was that the blessing?
It was part, you know, I didn't actually do a blessing with Creator. I just was inviting and saying hi to everybody to welcome you.
Okay. Yes, it's something that we all are still trying to figure out how to be respectful.
Yeah, well, you know, learn how to say hello, whether it's in Patricia's language or my language or the Mayan language or, you know, Aborigines. For us, it's manahu,
Manahu.
you know. And then, of course, when we say goodbye, we say awi no, but we're not saying goodbye. We say we'll see you again. And then if I'm leaving, I say awi no. And if you were staying, you would say agutatug, which means I will see you down the road. So we're always saying we're going to see you somewhere. You know, even if we die along the way, we'll still see you again.
True.
Somewhere's down the road.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron.
Well, if there are any, are there other questions, Alejandro, or?
Not for now. Those
Okay.
were all the questions that we had.
Okay, then I think it's time for us to wrap up. And for those of you who have stayed on, thank you very much for hanging with us. And for all of you who came, and to Ron and Patricia and Alejandro, muchas gracias. I don't know how to say thank you, Ron. I'm sorry. And the
We
North
don't,
Fork Mono,
we don't have a thank you.
it's just assumed.
Well, my thank you is that we do something for someone else.
Yes.
What you do for me, I do for somebody else.
Got it. Yes.
In some of the
That's-
things that we are sharing. And thank you very much, Ron, for your time and also for sharing all your wisdom with us. Patricia was also very happy, and she was very thankful for having this space as well. It's usually difficult for Indigenous communities to talk, especially from Indigenous communities that came from recent contact. They start getting in contact with Western civilization from 1964. So it's only about 80 years that they've been connected, if we say so, with the Western culture.
Yeah.
So it's a process, and it's something that they are doing as women. And
Tell her I really
their
appreciated her presentation.
Mhm.
And I usually have a PowerPoint, but my computer recently crashed, lost everything. So I'm kind of winging it right now.
I don't think it
Yes.
was necessary in this
Yeah.
case. And thank you to Sonia too. She was, that's quite a challenge, I would think, to translate and to interpret as she did. And she did a great job. So
Yes.
thank you. Yeah, it's
Thank you very much.
appreciated. So we have a couple of events coming up that might be of interest. One called Water Quality and Homelessness, the results of some studies that our students at SSU have done. That's coming up on October 14th, I think. And another program that's coming up as part of this Dig into Nature series is one with Kay Charter. She's the executive director of Saving Birds Through Habitat, and she's going to be talking about some of the reasons, the facts of the sharp decline in songbirds in California and some of the reasons behind that decline. So you can go to our website, which I think is in the chat, but we'll put it in again, and sign up for our future events that are coming up. And thank you all very much for joining us.